Chapter 3, Where It Really All Began. A broken bar. Where it really all began was at the top of a hill bank overlooking a natural harbor, an island, perfectly sheltered, within the embrace of the land around it. Even on damp, wet days, Brownsea was ethereal, otherworldly, a place beyond a place. Dinah Seven lived there, with her mother and her father, who was so remote as to be non-existent, who came to see her every so often to sit beside her and ask her about her day by telling her about his. It was always about criminals, and that he had caught them. Dinah had always imagined her father in a town or village, perhaps just down the hill from where her house stood now, all legally hers now, all challenges lost, perhaps on a bicycle blowing a whistle, or chasing crooks along the sea front, being impeded by walls and jumping over them, or around corners and dodging cars. Always getting his man. How lovely it all was, with the English Channel in sight, Chesil Beach to her right. From her vantage point, Dinah had come all the way back to the little village overlooking the coast of Dorset, as she had always promised herself that she would. After everything, she could understand why her parents were always annoyed. Yes, she could see that. But she had never done anything wrong. Why her father kept her away from her brother, Dinah could never begin to guess at. But she had managed to concoct ways of being in touch, letters, which could be posted as a ruse, or excuses for him to return. And when was old enough, when she had just turned 18, she had followed him to London, to be near him, though he never knew, for he had turned away from her, told her she had been a bad girl, to upset their parents so. She had wanted to see him, and live back where they had lived, when she had been a child, when he had been a young man. And now she had everything she needed to live her life peacefully, up there, on the side of a hill, overlooking 88,888,888. Commissioner Selwyn Patterson picked up the old-fashioned rotary dial telephone receiver on the second ring, and put down his pen. Yes, Chief Inspector. All is well, here, all is as normal. A steady rate of crime and a steady rate of catching them. Yes, a broken bar apostrophe. And, in the space of 3 seconds, Commissioner Patterson's joviality fell flat as the Chief Inspector detailed the reason for the call. The grave reason. Escaped? Patterson repeated. Are you sure? A loud, rattling reply ensured the Commissioner knew that Michael Dix was indeed serious. Escaped? Selwyn Patterson repeated. You've let that dangerous man escape. And only now tell me. He looked through the window in the direction of the Honor police station. And you cannot tell me where his accomplice is? There was a pause. Friend, then, he added. No, of course I'm not going to tell him. What good would that do? After a few more minutes of strained conversation, and some terse words near the end, Commissioner Patterson put down the receiver. What had once been the highest priority, namely the quality assuring of the merchant vessels moored in St. Mary's capital ports, had now been replaced by something far more important. He should tell Richard Poole he was a good detective, a great detective, and didn't deserve this. On the other hand, the great detective Richard Poole did not deserve this. Glancing at the now silent telephone, with a knot forming in his stomach, Commissioner Selwyn Patterson went back to the boat licenses. 88,888,888. Present day. Honore tilde copyright, St. Marie. Richard Poole had let Fidel Best assemble the murder board, his being a sergeant now, to give him some practice. But the truth was, he could not bear to see up close that photograph of Bobby Weymouth, the picture of a broken bar of a bread knife sticking out of her back. What do we know? D.I. Poole asked his team. It was getting dark now. The lights, usually irritating his sense of direction this time of day, were strangely comforting. He had taken tea once they had got back to the station, and sat out in the shade just a heartbeat longer than customary. And had Camille Bawdy not been trying to repeatedly call the Guadeloupe forensics number, she would have noticed. Do we know who she was, why she was here? Richard Poole clicked on the autopilot, unable to see anything now than a figure, a body, a victim. How long had it been since he had seen Bobby? But she wasn't called Bobby when she was born. A broken bar. A broken bar. He remembered holding her in his arms. A broken bar. His own. A broken bar. No one else mattered in the world. A broken bar. Roberta Claire Weymouth. A broken bar. A broken bar over here. Broken bar on a relaxing holiday with friends. A Caribbean trip. 4 friends. All of them worked in a broken bar insurance. A broken bar. All of them booked time off from their employers, having been planning it for about a year. Sergeant Fidel Best read from his notes. Best friend, Anne Fredericks. A broken bar works for a broken bar Cunningham and Barnard Limited, as did Robert. A broken bar. Anne's boyfriend Philippe Jacques, originally from Paris. His sister, Julie and Jacques, worked for a different insurer. All of them flew out last. A broken bar Wednesday. Richard Poole watched as Camille put up the pictures onto the board. They looked like real people to him, Richard thought, then scolded himself for thinking it. A broken bar. Bobby had friends. A broken bar. She may well have worked in insurance. A broken bar. He hadn't seen her since, well, since he had been needed here, for whatever reason. And, now he thought about it, what would a DI from the Met be able to do that a perfectly good DI from Saint Marie, or another island couldn't? Yes, the Caribbean had nearly all its islands in the top 20 countries for murders per head of the population, but him? Here? He was stalking, Richard told himself, crossly. Bobby was always going to be there, and he knew one day she would confront him. But, not like this. God. Number. Not murdered. Sir. A broken bar, sir. The shout penetrated D.I. Poole's wandering mind, and he looked with a smile back to Sergeant Bawdy. Yes, so, Richard regrouped. We have a broken bar. 3 friends, now suspects. He looked across to Fidel. Take Dwayne. And when you've finished, escort the evidence directly to Antigua's Glacier Speed Forensics and see if you can bump start this one. Camille, he continued, ignoring the questioning raised eyebrow at the request to jump this case's analysis, find out whether the forensics lab have last week's. Without waiting to find out whether the team had started, Detective Inspector Poole sat down and looked at the paper again, particularly at the report procured by Camille for glass fragments, and the one from 2 years before, for arsenic and rum. Tittle, he said, aloud. Camille turned and gave him a look. What, sir? Realizing the word could sound vaguely rude, Richard Poole held up the report paper. Tiny, little, he told her. A portmanteau word, from tiny and little, tittle. He pointed to an eye on the word, in. Tittle. Yes, sir, Camille replied, exasperated. Then, she turned from him and spoke into her phone. French. Richard remembered that she spoke French. Not Camille, obviously. But Bobby. His Bobby. The only girl he had ever loved, who had given him such a runaround. Well, if he really believed that, he should be packing his bag now. This wasn't Bobby Weymouth, it couldn't be. And in a day, he would be sitting there, with the DNA evidence in his hand. The lab report, where these would have little flicks on them rather than a dot. Bobby Weymouth was still alive, and everything would be as it should be.